Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 16 millimeter Film Crew. I'm Cindy.
And I'm Dale.
You can watch us on YouTube. You can like and comment on our YouTube videos and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can listen to us everywhere podcasts are found at 16 millimeter Film Crew Podcast. And you can visit us on our website at www.16millimeterfilmcrew.com. This week, we watched Gladiator II. Years after witnessing the death of Maximus at the hands of his uncle Lucius, at the hands of his uncle, Lucius. Sorry. Uncle, Lucius must enter the Colosseum after the powerful emperors of Rome conquer his home. With rage in his heart and the future of the empire at stake, he looks to the past to find the strength and the honor needed to return the glory of Rome to its people. This cast stars Paul Mescal, Pedro Pascal, Joseph Quinn, Fred Hinchinger, Laura Raz, Derek Jacobi, Connie Nielsen, and Denzel Washington. And it is directed by Ridley Scott. So, Dale, thoughts?
It's like real. I don't know. I don't think this was as good as the first one. It's still an amazing movie. This is an example of when a studio or director is going to an idea or concept they loved, and they're trying to return to it and capture that same energy. Some things are lost and some things are added to it. It's a wonderful execution of shoehorning a subplot that was barely touched in the first movie and making it the overarching theme and plot of this one. So I thought that was wonderfully executed because I was really wondering how they're going to make it work and how they're going to tie to the first one. But yeah, execution by Ridley Scott and also David Zappa and Peter Craig with the writing duties. Amazing job with that. But yeah, I love the movie. There are some nitpicks I have with it, but all in all, still a good picture.
Yeah, some nitpicks should be the review of this movie. Like,
Yeah.
some nitpicks. Because there are some things that are just like, mm. And I agree. I remember watching Gladiator and it's being like, wow, this is a fantastic movie. Like, and it stayed in my mind for weeks and months after I watched it. And in this one, I left feeling the same way I felt after I watched Dune Part 2, which is this is a really good movie, but I'm not feeling that same like thrill of excitement that I was, or even like satisfaction that I was after I watched the first one. So it's interesting. I don't know, because it's not a bad movie by any means. It is pretty good. Like maybe if it was on its own, it might have been better, but then the whole plot would kind of fall apart if it was on its own. It's weird because it's like as a sequel, I
Mm.
think it's fine.
Yeah.
If it was by itself, maybe it would have done better, but because it's so attached to the first one, then I can't really see it outside of the first one. I have to kind of take these two things as like a package deal. So I felt really good. It's just like, yeah, it's just missing some things.
Mm.
And there were certain things that could have been different. It's hard because it's like when I saw the trailer, everyone was like, why, who asked for this? And it's like, true, nobody asked for it, but they made it anyways. So it's like we kind of just have to see where it goes with this one. And yeah, it just feels it's a weird one because it's like it was good, but it's just I'm not full.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, this movie does a lot of very much Star Wars log style callbacks to the first one. Of course you had Denzel character, and like the thing with these a lot of these movies are is they use some historical characters and twist and turn them a little bit to fit the story. Like
Hmm.
honestly, with Denzel's character being a former gladiator and being free copies the first one with what's his name? I think it's Maximus is his name in the first one. Played by
Russell Crowe?
not Russell Crowe. Not Russell Crowe. Oh man, what's the guy? He died during filming. I'm trying to remember his name. Oliver Reed. Oliver Reed,
Hmm.
who's Proxima. Like
Yeah.
that they both are former gladiators who earned their freedom and now few other gladiators. You have both Dryman Hunt's character in the first one as a black gladiator. You have I forgot his name, but I remember him from Spartacus. And that's why I was like, oh, that's that dude from Spartacus. Loraz, who plays the
Mm.
is it Loraz? I'm not sure. But the African guy who when he's in Africa, like I remember him from Spartacus. And I was like, oh, that's a dude from Spartacus. Same thing as John Hunt's character is one of the few black gladiators there. So there are a lot of thematic callbacks, and also the fact that Connie Nelson's back from the first one, along with two of the other senators who were in the
Hmm.
first one. So there's a lot of still thematic thought ties to that first one.
Yeah, this one definitely was like super tied in, which makes sense. Like the little kid from the first movie is this kid or who becomes Palm School.
Yeah,
But like I have questions on that.
yeah,
Um, because even in the trailer when he's like, I never knew a mother or a father, I'm like, what? Did I misremember what happened in the first movie? Because he was like 12. Like he wasn't like a
yeah,
baby when he left.
yeah,
So like you do remember your mom. You're with her like at the end of the movie. Like what are you talking about? Like I understand him not knowing his father because that the parentage was like intentionally ambiguous. Like they weren't trying to say like it's definitely Russell Crowe, but like
yeah.
you knew it was. It just wasn't explicitly said in that movie.
Mm,
So it made sense with him not knowing who his father was, but it's like you do know who your mother was because you guys were with each other multiple times in the first film. So I was confused on why he was confused. I was like,
mm,
how do we link that up? And then I feel like in trying to explain how he didn't remember, but then he does remember, I feel like I missed something in that where it's like he was saying I think at first he was saying I the person who you're looking for is not here. Like when she confronts him in the cell,
yeah.
she's like, well, the guy you're looking for is not here. And I thought maybe he was speaking more metaphorically, like
Mm,
that little kid is dead because I had to be on my own and you abandoned me, etc. and so forth. And then so it kind of felt like that was it, but then it also felt like at some point he was like, yes, I know you're my mother and I will ride for you. I
yeah.
was just confused
It
because I was
was.
like,
I don't think it was a bit of both. I do think he does remember aspects of his childhood, but and I think it was more so metaphorical as the person you knew, that 12-year-old boy that you loved and cared for, who you also abandoned, who needed his mother and had to survive on his own. That person's not here. I'm a totally different person. I'm not the person you're looking for. So I understood on a metaphorical level. But then you also have him changing and being somebody who he is now. His life is completely different. So I understood it clearly away. And it was also he's also it's also a sense of abandonment. Like I know you're my mother, but I don't accept you as my mother, because what kind of mother abandons like a 12-year-old boy to go and fend for himself and somehow survive? And you were hoping on hope that I would survive and be alive. I did, but that's nigh impossible, lady. That is fucked up. So,
hmm.
so I understand um Lucius, I'm gonna use his Roman name. Lucius is, um ambivalence and unwilling to accept his mother, you know.
No, that makes sense of
Yeah.
like you guys wouldn't be close. I guess I was just confused on like the not knowing the parentage and then recognizing it. Because I was just like, well, does he not know or does he just choose not to accept? Because those are two different things.
Well, I think he accepted who his mother is. It's kind of hard not to accept who your mother is. Like, think about it. Think about it as we look at our parents as kids. Like, even in my parents in their 60s, for some reason, to me, they still like how they would look in their 30s when I was smaller. So your parents kind of don't change the way you recognize them, no matter how old you get or how old they get. Um, but I do think the issue of his parentage from his father, I can see why that is confusing, because it really wasn't even explicitly stated in the first movie, which is kind of like we had a thing, and then that was it, you
Yeah.
know. So yeah,
Yeah, that's my point. My point is like, does he is the my question is, did he really not know who she was?
I
Or
think
did he knew, but
yeah,
he just didn't want to accept her?
I think you
because
just
she
didn't want to
abandoned him.
accept her. I think,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
So that part of it was not made clear to me. I
Oh,
was
okay.
confused on whether he actually knew or whether he didn't know who she was
No.
because like I said, there's dialogue in the film where he's talking about how he doesn't know who his parents are. And my question was, well, how do you not know when you were 12 when you left?
Yeah,
That was my confusion. I was just like it didn't it felt like the metaphor of like him not wanting to like,
accept
accept
her.
her
Yeah,
kind of overrode like the actual question of like whether he remembered her or not.
yeah,
Because she is her own journey is like figuring out like, oh, is this actually my son? So like there was like a little bit of that in the beginning, and then she was like, oh yeah, this is definitely my kid.
hmm.
So that was her journey. My journey was, is that the same for you, Lucius? Because we don't, it's like I guess if you didn't watch the first one, maybe you would have those questions. But if you did, then you would kind of already know and you would be questioning why he is questioning. So Ridley, y'all didn't make that
I
explicit to
mean, the
me.
writing
And
part isn't
I
Ridley's fault, you know.
wasn't he involved?
He
Or
what
he
he
wasn't involved in the writing?
not in the writing. The writing was mostly done by Peter Craig and David Scampa. So
Okay, well
yeah,
y'all,
yeah.
yeah. Um, but interestingly, I feel like the film really wasn't that much about him or about Pedro Pascal. Like, and it's interesting because like they are sold as like the main events kind of in this film, especially in the promotion of it. But this film was really about Denzel. Like to
Yes,
me, Denzel, he hard carried this movie on his
yes,
back. Like he was the best part of it.
yeah,
He ate up every scene that he was in. Like when I was in theater, his parts got the most laugh and the most engagement. So like this is kind of Denzel's movie,
yeah,
which is weird because it's like, isn't it supposed to be about Palm? And it's like, not really.
yeah. Denzel's character is the one who more so than anybody else pushes the plot forward. This movie is not about Paul Mescal. This movie is not about, uh, Pedro Pascal. This is about Denzel's character. Like Denzel, they might have given him Paul the lead title character billing as the Gladiator, but this is Denzel's movie. And I saw a lot
Mm-hmm.
of reviews say the thing like the actual start of the movie is not those two characters. It is Denzel. He carries this movie in a phenomenal way, and he's so engaging. And I saw a lot of people like initial ratings for the movie were kind of poor because people had a hard time reckoning. Oh, why is a black man in ancient Rome? And I was like, I had back like ancient Rome spread like across the major Mediterranean into North
Yeah.
Africa. They
Africa,
had
hello.
a lot of cultures intermingling with both Greek and Roman culture, even up into the Middle Ages, where you had the Moors in England and stuff. Like like antiquity and Middle Ages were very multicultural, more than people want to give it credit for. So I
Mm-hmm.
had no and how Rome worked is when they conquered people is indentured servitude for X amount of years, you could be a part of our empire or a citizen after X amount of years. So it was a very cosmopolitan metropolitan empire. So I had no reason why Denzel would be, you know, in the position of esteem he is. I wish there probably were more black characters in the background, maybe to sell that point more. But yeah,
Mm.
this is Denzel's movie.
Yeah. And I think that the actually what I wish this movie was about versus what it kind of turned out to be, which is more of just like following that lineage from Maximus to Lucius and his hero's journey,
Mm-hmm.
and reckoning with his past. But I wish this movie actually was about what it meant to be conquered in that time period.
Yeah,
Having your entire family, culture, like everything kind of stripped away from you, and you have to be forced into this like alien space that you don't know and that you don't want to be in because you did not voluntarily go to Rome.
yeah,
Like, and they kind of reckoned with that a little bit with Pedro Pascal's character of like feeling conflicted about, being the general and like how like, they had certain characters who were like supporting cast, like especially Ravi the doctor, like Ravi the doctor, Denzel, like you had these people who are people of color who were trying to like figure out like what their place was in this empire that they're not really like they did not want to be a part of, but they're here now. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like Robbie assimilates, thinks like, I am a Roman citizen, whatever. Denzel chooses, like, he came in as a slave and he was like, you know what, I'm gonna take this whole thing over. Like, I thought those points of view were actually really interesting. And I think if we had thought about more like of conquering migrants, like things that are actually very salient to like what we are experiencing right now, like the issues of immigration and stuff. Like I thought that would have been a more compelling story.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like they had a lot of elements in there about that, but because it's trying to be a continuation of the first one, you're more focusing on Paul's character and like his personal loss and his personal like reckoning with who his father was and whatever. Because it's not like he had a goal to like reform this, like reform the structure of Rome. It was
Yeah.
just like I just want revenge, and now
Yeah.
that I have it, like I don't even know peace because everyone who I came to love is dead. So it's
Yeah.
just like, well, that's kind of a less compelling story in my view.
And I think that also helps in why Denzel's character of Martinez is a parallel to his character because he sees the rage within um Lucius that he had as
Mhm.
a former slave now being compelled to perform in the gladiatorial arenas for people's amusement. So he I think he saw a bit of himself in him, that rage, that vengeance. He wants somebody said because Denzel's character wants Rome to crumble. That's his
Mhm.
overall goal. Like, and it also goes into another thing of how we view people based on our experiences with them. Because both Maximus in the first movie, both Pedro Pascal's character, the general in this movie, and also Paul Mescal's character of Lucius were influenced by Marcus Aurelius, and they had a different view of Marcus Aurelius, as a kind and gentle emperor who cared about the people. But then Denzel's like, oh, he was my master. I was his
Mhm.
slave. I have a
Mhm.
total different view from him based on where I stand in society. For me, he was cruel. I'm branded with his mark for the rest of his life. He's an emperor of Rome. I want everything he stands for to crumble. His son, his wife, all his influences. I want this whole world to crumble and feel my vengeance. So that goes into how we like our interactions with different people. How me and you could know the same person, but you can have a different experience with them, and I could have a different experience with them, and we come to two contradictory views on how that person is remembered.
Yeah, and that often
Yeah.
happens. um, but yeah, it's interesting because when I think about the first Gladiator, it's this kind of Game of Thronesy version of the story where it's like, you know, Marcus Aurelius dies, he chooses Maximus to be his heir, but then and he's not a part of the family, he's just a good general.
Yeah.
And then the actual family members, a brother and sister, like Joaquin Phoenix kills dad, and then he tries to, usurp the throne and pushes his sister out the way. And it's interesting because it's like, well, I, as Maximus, he's like, well, I don't really want this. What I
Mhm.
want is to go back to my family, but they're all dead. So like, I mean, I'll do it, but it's more of just like you're seeing a person who's not meant for this role
Mhm.
earn it through his values, through the way that he treats other people, like
Mhm.
through his perspective. But he dies at the end. So you don't really know what that could have been like. Like whatever that dream of Rome that they keep talking about, like if you had a person that came in power, would things change? Maybe, but like we don't know because he dies. So like in the second movie, we're kind of coming back around to that same thing where it's like you have these two brothers who are terrible leaders, and you have someone who is in Denzel trying to kind of burn this whole thing down because of how it's treated him, how it's kind of taken away a lot of his life, but also who is like, I'm going to be the thing that changes things because I'm like, I'm gonna burn it down, but I'm gonna remake it, but remake it the way I want to. So you're not really changing the system, you're just becoming a part of it,
Yeah.
just like so
Yeah. Which always
and
happens. It's
it
funny
always
enough.
happens.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, let's go with that theme. But then what happened? Denzel dies, and then we're left with Paul, right? And so and then what and then what? So it's like what is I guess my question is like what is the actual point? Like what are we really getting at here?
Yeah.
Like are we talking about this system that is like destroying people's lives and like making everyone terrible? Like are we going to talk about that? Because it seems like we are, but we're not really getting to a point. Like we're
It's
not
like a surface
saying,
level.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like what are we getting at here? Because the Roman Empire falls, like we know that in like historically. It's interesting that the people like, who were living at that time obviously didn't think it was. And even as it was in its decline, people kind of still thought everything was okay. Um, so maybe if they make a third Gladiator, maybe they'll finally get around to it of like the fall of Rome. Like, how do we get here? And like what comes up after this and whatever. Are we learning any lessons? Probably not. But like, you know what I'm saying? It's just I feel like this movie like almost gets to the thing, but then it never really actually gets to the thing.
Mhm.
So it's like, mm,
Yeah.
okay.
It just kind of glances and doesn't really go to it. Yeah, and it's funny. We talk about leadership and how societies decline and people kind of ignore it because we're kind of sort of doing that right now. But
Oh yeah, we are in our flop era, let me tell
so
you that right now.
yeah. And it's also funny, like it's the person who like and my thing with this movie is its ending is ambiguous because like he ends with "Oh, speak to me, Father." Like I'm like, are you praying to like a Roman god? Are you praying to Maximus? To speak to you, like, or do you become emperor at the end because anybody who could actually prove your lineage to Marcus Aurelius is now dead? So how do we end here? And like the soldiers on both sides just accept his speech like, oh yeah, I'm the kid from like 16 years ago, and they're like, oh okay, cool, and like they fall into battle because the ring is there. Like it's so left open ended.
Yeah.
Like it. I think that the ending really ruins what was a really good movie for the
Mm.
most part. It's like a horrible letdown, and part of the big thing with the ending also for me is one of my visual nitpicks. The CGI at the end where it's all the clouds I thought was really poorly done. And that continues to my other tangential thought on the technicality of this movie. The scenes in the Coliseum were beautifully done, but I feel like with the advent of digital cameras and film, there is something lost. There's a detail there that's lost that was captured in like original film that we do not have. Like I'm gonna cover this later, but one of the movies I watched this past weekend for fun was Tombstone. That was done in the late '90s or 2000s. It was still shot on film, and the level of detail there that I saw, like I felt like, oh, there's something missing in modern cinema that we don't get now with digital. And watching the first Gladiator and then watching this, like the first Gladiator, of course, was still was digital as well, but there's some things there because digital was not perfect, that you still relied on old film techniques to do that, look so much better when you watch this movie right after that.
Yeah, and I think it's a good time to talk about the technical stuff because that's my biggest gripe with this
Yeah.
film. I remember what like when I was watching it, I was like, this kind of feels like watching 300, where it's like so like there's something so
Saturated.
like, yeah, but like not. Like it's there, but it's also like, it's kind of a little uncanny valley, like where it's just like, why does that kind of like I'm just thinking about that first initial scene where they're coming in on the boats and they're trying to conquer that where that place where Paul's from.
Hmm.
And I'm like, why does this kind of look a little, is that just me or does it look a little? And then there were other scenes where, they're using what digital monkey,
The
VFX
baboons, yeah.
baboons and all these different animals. And you're just like, is it just me or does it look kind of?
Yeah.
And then even small things like where they cut off Joe Quinn's head, one of the emperors, and they present it. And I'm like, well, that is not him. Like that who they didn't even like let him sit in to do the cast work in order to get like a good mold of his face. Like that doesn't even look like him at all. I've seen better decapitated heads on Game of Thrones. Like I was just like, why does everything here look a little not like this budget, like the budget cost, I guess is my
Yeah.
question. And I was just like, everything just look a little off to
Yeah.
me. And it's weird because it's like the first Gladiator definitely did not look like this. Even when it came to like the production design, the first Gladiator, oh my God, everything just looks so gorgeous. And I feel like in this one, it felt like they kind of spent all of the money on like the big set pieces. And so like when it came to even like Caesar's castle or like or his palace or whatever, everything just kind of didn't look as good as the first one. And I'm like, why is that? Because I'm just like, I'm sure you have way more money than you did when you made that film. And
Mhm.
you have access to like better quality technology because of time. So it's just like, it just didn't look good, which is weird. Like the action pieces looked really good. Like I guess the money they spent on that, all of that stuff in the Colosseum looked great because he built the Colosseum. So all of that looked real because they actually built it. I
Mhm.
just feel like everything else just look, I don't know. It just
Yeah. There, for me, there's a scene in the first Gladiator that I like. Two scenes that stick out to me is a lot of the gladiatorial fights in the first one, Russell Crowe, when they're
mhm,
fighting, the sandals moving, they're shifting weight, horses are stampeding, dust is billowing all around them in their feet. And then when they're in the cells for the gladiators, if they're at night, there's a heavy glow of candles. Like even if they're practicals, the glow is there, lighting up the area. This orange glow tinting everything. Everybody's in an orange hue. Very, very colorful, very, filling out the scene. But you go to this one, the first scene we see in the dark is when they're being shuttled into like a room where they're all being fed, and there's only one light behind them, but it's still really dark and still somewhat lit. I feel like somebody just said, "Oh, bump up the ISO," and like all those things as far as like how would I light a room, you
mhm,
know, to fit this environment, kind of just went out the window. It was like, "Oh, we'll just use one light here, like one practical right there to give somewhat of an orange hue that would exist," and they relied the rest on like Fresnels and LED lighting at a dimmer setting. But that glow, that ambiance that the first one had is not there. And then, like I said, the stuff in the gladiatorial arena, like the dust is like they kind of try to cheat it by doing a cutaway scene at the end where before they showcase his mother on the chariot thing, where the horses are kind of patting down the dust like how they do in baseball fields and shit. But
mhm.
even still, with all that combat going on, as they're shifting their weight, it happens at baseball games. They wet down the field and pat it down before baseball games. Guess what? And when the baseball game starts up and somebody slides or shifts, that dust billows. None of that happened in this one. When they're fighting in the arena, watch the first with Russell Crowe. Like the sun is baking down on them. The scene is like really bright. Like you could tell the sun is there. And there's a contrast in this movie of when they're. You mentioned the scene where the ships are coming in, how and the sun is there, cloudless. The sun is baking. You see how brightly lit everybody is. You see how brightly lit uh Paul Mescal is. But when you go to the arena, it goes, oh, it's really dim. It's not as brightly lit anymore. So this sunny environment is no longer sunny. It's an eternal shade,
Mhm.
which I didn't really like get. Like, why are we now shading what should be sunny environments and stuff like that? Which kind of, I wouldn't say it killed my immersion, but I was like, oh, this is not, the arena, that I was expecting to see.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll say this for Dune 2, you are immersed. Like even though all of it isn't, they're not shooting it, not all of it is practical. Like some things are, and some things are shot in the studio. Like, but for some reason, you still feel immersed in the environments that they're giving you. And I just feel like with the technology that we have now, there isn't, and the money, it doesn't really seem like there's a reason why we can't give that experience when we're doing these big tentpole films. Like this
Hmm.
is a movie that they've waited 20 plus years to make. I feel
Yeah,
like you should have thrown everything at it in terms
yeah,
of like how it looks, how it feels, to
mhm,
really get people back into that atmosphere. So it's just that was also a letdown for me personally. That's one of the things that kind of made this movie not as great as I wanted it to be because I was just like, I don't feel like I'm a part of this really.
yeah,
Like I feel like I'm kind of watching like a documentary
yeah.
on ancient Rome, which I don't think was their intended.
Yeah. Like even
desire.
even when they go into like the mausoleum in honor of Maximus underneath the arena, and they go in with a torch, the walls are like lit white. It's that orange glow, those shadows being cast by a flickering flame. Those things aren't there. Like when his mother goes to see him in the prison cell, the only clear light source we see in the prison cell is the light behind him that faces outside. But when they pan to both her and him, when he's facing her, of course he's going to be kind of well lit, but also a bit in a shadow because the only real light source would be that window. It would face him and show him a little better. But when the camera turns to face her, she is just as well lit too. When she should be the front of her face should be more darker. There should be a little bit more of a hair light around her because her back is toward the sun. Those kind of details were not in there for me, which, yeah.
Mm. I think, yeah, I feel like in terms of just how the movie looked, it just looked like whatever. Just I don't know, it just didn't look as good as I thought it would. Um, but I think that the performances were so good. I feel like it was a really great cast, and I feel like even though some of the characters didn't play like a major part in it, as I thought they might have, like Joe Quinn or Fred or
Mm,
even Pedro, they didn't play as big of a part as I thought that they would be in this movie. I still think that like all the performances were really good. Like this movie was very like big speeches, lots of spitting, and people just like absolutely going for it. Like everyone was insane.
mm,
Like just like in terms of like how they chose to act, like it was a lot of big acting. It was a
mm,
lot of like
yeah.
there were choices made for this film.
Yeah, and major props to like Joseph Quinn and Fred.
Mm,
Fred Heidringer, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong, I apologize. But
mm.
yeah, like I was always concerned on how the plot would work with two twin emperors on throne. But they show that Joseph Quinn is the more dominant one compared to his brother. The one who is more emperor-like in this picture than the brother. The brother is like there just to be there. And in most cases, and if this movie was actually probably more historically accurate, 9 times out of 10, Joseph Quinn would have probably killed his brother a long time ago, so we have no usurpers to the throne. Understanding the fact that his brother is not fully mentally functioning. And as we see, he anoints, his first advisor is his pet monkey. Knowing that, and how successful his brother is. Joseph Quinn's character. I would have killed him to avoid other people influencing his brother, and that way he'd have no adversaries for the throne. But I do think Joseph Quinn, and like we mentioned Denzel, this being Denzel's picture, but Joseph Quinn also does an amazing job with his role as well.
Yeah, I thought he was excellent actually. And I'm glad that he's getting like more roles and more opportunities because he was even when in Stranger Things, he was just so good in that. So I'm just
Mhm.
like really happy that he is being more exposed to like everyone in terms of his talent. And I think that Denzel, his choices of like how he carried his robes, that was one thing that I really noticed a lot. It's like him carrying and like rearranging the robes as like a symbol of like trying to be powerful.
Yeah,
And even when he would like get up right up in people's faces and like stare them down, it's like, whoa, you got really scared. I was like, oh my God. It's that same like fear that he like instills in people in most of his movies, honestly, but I'm thinking of Training Day, especially. But like, yeah, so I thought, I mean, obviously he was amazing, but even Connie Nielsen, like coming back as that character, I think she was great too. Um, I feel like Pedro wasn't given like a lot to do, so like, but I think he still did well in like the stuff that he was given. Kind of wish he was given a little bit more. And for Paul, I think that Paul did a great job. I think that he understood the assignment, like this is the character that who you're playing.
yeah,
And I think that like in terms of the physical stuff, obviously, like he was great at that. I think all the fight sequences and stuff were really great. And he is like a little mini fridge. Like he isn't that tall, but he's like very buff. So he is like a little bull, just like running through things and like knocking people over. I That was fun to watch. And
yeah,
everyone in the theater got a real kick out of all of those like
yeah,
action stuff. But emotionally, I think he also knows how to like carry his characters because that's his background, I guess. Like he does all of the, independent, very like introspective kind of characters. And I think that that's probably something that he's more aligned to. Like he just would rather do stuff like that. I think because it's really Scott, it was like, okay, well, this is a great opportunity. Like obviously you're gonna take it. But I think he's in any case, I still think he's like a really good leading man. I think he knows how to lead a film, even though this wasn't his film per se. I feel like
Mhm.
even in those moments, like he still carried the story through of like this is a grieving man who is just out for revenge, and then it's like a loss. Like he doesn't really know where he fits anymore because he doesn't really belong anywhere. And I think that I think he played the truth of that very well. Um, Another issue that I had, I forgot, now I remembered, aggressive use of slow motion.
Yeah, the crowd shots.
Um, Yeah, but
Mm.
even like moments where like I know at that moment where Denzel is killing Joe Quinn's character or when it's just like the aggressive slow-mo, it's just please stop.
Hmm.
I need you to stop because it really what it did is it took me completely out of those moments, which were really supposed to be impactful moments, but like it took me out of those moments because it's like we had to slow it down, and I'm just like, please, red light.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, this, I don't know. If you want to watch a movie about gladiators, that's probably better, or a show, watch Spartacus. It's, probably on demand. Wonderful series. Um, one thing I do wish there was in this movie that they did showcase in the first one is yes, Maximus was a talented general, but he also ingratiated himself with his fellow gladiators to the point where they trusted and revered him. Where in this one, you know, you see smart quips from not Pedro Pascal, but um dang it. Lucius. You see smart quips from him, kind of being kind of cocky, like I don't want to be here, kind of thing. But then when they go into the arenas, he wants to give all these commands, and people are following him. Like he doesn't interact with his fellow gladiators enough for me to believe why they would have trust in him. Like we're shown in the beginning of the movie that he's a trusted general, who knows what he's doing. So at that point we understand. Okay, in the arena he's giving out commands. All right, cool. But we're not being shown a reason for these men to trust him at all. They've been giving him. We've seen him joke with them, like make monkey noises because he bit the baboon and stuff like that. But there's really been shown no reason up until the first fight. The first after the first fight, I can see why they would trust him, but in that first scene, only one person does list him. Everybody else does. We're not showing a reason as to why everybody would follow him, his commands, in the arena. You know, and I wish they had actually shown his camaraderie or developing a camaraderie in it. Because, like I said, a lot of scenes where they're in the chambers with other gladiators, he only really interacts with Ravi, and that's it. He doesn't really interact with any other gladiators. And then at the end of the movie, he gives this big rousing speech, and they follow him into battle with the risk their lives. We're given no reason as to why they would trust him. They know he's a brilliant fighter, but yeah, I wish that was fine tuned the story a bit more.
Yeah, there wasn't any development. It was more just like, well, if you're coming to this movie, then you know that he is going to lead it, right?
Yeah,
It's like making a lot of assumptions of the audience of like, well, if you watch the trailer, then you know, like,
yeah,
he is going to be commanding these group of guys. So like, just go with it.
yeah,
Don't think about it. And it's like, well, that's not good storytelling.
yeah.
Like, and to be very like the trailer does give away this entire film.
Hmm.
Which I think is a huge disservice that I saw when I watched the actual trailer. I was like, well, why would you tell us all of this stuff? Now we already know what's gonna happen going in.
Yeah,
Like, so whoever was on that end, I don't know if it was marketing or I don't know who's making those decisions, but like don't give away the whole film. We shouldn't know that much about what's happening in the story because it's like, then why go?
I think that's the issue with marketing in general. I think far too many movies and their marketing and the trailers reveal too much. Like mentioned last week, Oppenheimer and stuff. In Oppenheimer, it was okay because we all know this man's gonna eventually drop the nuke. So them
Right.
giving out too
It's
many
a historical
details,
figure.
it's
Yes.
fine. But this is not really. This is really fictional based. And like, yeah, we're gonna throw out the whole story in the first 2 minutes of the trailer. I feel like that's early disservice. And like the storytelling elements, I feel like they relied on the audience. Oh, we want you to fill the gaps. We're not going to do the work for you. We want you to fill the gaps yourself. What I think is really lazy writing. So,
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So it's just like, I don't know, with all the goodwill I had in my heart for this movie, because I really was so excited about it when I was like seeing the photos and like just like hearing about it and being like, oh, the cast is amazing. Like I was so excited for this movie. And as like it came time to actually watch it, like not even watching it, just like the weeks leading up to, it just kind of felt like this wasn't gonna be that good. It felt like another one of the movies that came out this year in the same vein as like Twister or something like that, where it's like I was excited to see this, but as now that I've seen it, or like now as we were leading up to it, it just the excitement kind of dropped off.
mm,
Where it's just like, well, this isn't really as good as I thought it was going to be. And I mean, it is a really like predictable story. Like you do know exactly where it's going to go. So it wasn't that interesting from that point of view either. And I really feel like unless you're doing an adaptation of like a really popular book or something, like where the audience would know a lot about the plot, so you don't actually have to like you still hit the beats, but it's like when the people are coming, like they already know kind of know like what they're coming for. They kind of know what is going to happen. Like on the opposite side of Gladiator is Wicked, right?
mm,
Many people have gone to see the theater production or they've read the book. So like I don't know what the movie actually is, but like you really don't even need to do that much heavy lifting in terms of like let's do character development because it's like well most of the people coming here are huge fans of something that of the show or the book. So it's like they already know what's going to happen here. You should still do it because that's good writing, but I'm saying if you didn't want to, it would be okay in those circumstances. This isn't that. Like this is very much like we watched the first movie, but these most of the characters here are new. So like you do have to actually do the legwork in terms of like getting us to a place where we would believe that this person who yes you've shown to be a good leader can now be a good leader of these people who are strangers to him. Like they're
mm,
in a really dangerous situation. Why would they trust him? Why would they follow him? You have to do all of that work too. So it's like you can't really it kind of felt like they kind of try to shortcut their way through it because the property was already known and beloved, but it's like if you're gonna make a second one, you know,
yeah. And
more work has to be done actually.
yeah, yeah, and I feel like this is part of a trend for really Scott in a way. I mean, of course, the last duel didn't do that good. House of Gucci was okay. Napoleon was like a bit 50-50. In some points. The
Yeah.
movie felt too long. I can see why. I could see why 20th Century Fox, like, luckily he was doing this and they handed off, the last Alien movie to another director, because we don't know how that would have went with Ridley Scott at helm. But yeah, I don't know. It's weird watching prolific directors kind of wax and wane
Mm.
um as they age, but it is what it is. Still a good movie, but it could have been so much better, on a technical aspect and a storytelling aspect, for me. So.
Yeah, and I feel like that last point that you made is really true because that is kind of not all across the board, but I do feel like that has been happening. It's like as they've gotten older, they've been getting into like patterns of like how they want to make movies. Like Ridley has said like he just puts like a bunch of cameras on a scene, so that's how they are able to quickly shoot.
And he
Like he
shoots for
doesn't want to
coverage. Yeah.
yeah, he doesn't want to be there all day. So like it's just like well, okay, I guess for the convenience and the fact that you're like 80, yeah, I get it. I get that you're not trying to be there for months and months, but I do think that sometimes after you've been in a lull, which I think that Ridley Scott has been in a lull, and unfortunately, Gladiator II didn't really push him out of it. Like it's a lot better than the movies that he has been making recently,
Yeah.
but it's not as good as the movies that he used to make back in the day. So I feel like now that maybe he's in this lull, it can push him to like be hungry again to like really want to create something groundbreaking and incredible. Like Martin Scorsese was in a lull, right? And then he made Killers of the Flower Moon, which
Yeah.
did not get his due. Like honestly, I think that movie is fantastic and it should have gotten way more attention.
Yeah,
There was some stuff in there, but like for the most part, he was back.
beautiful. It was
Like
beautiful. Yeah,
he was back.
yeah.
So I feel like maybe he just maybe really just needs like this one little extra push to get him back to just being like, I want to grind.
But I also think that comes to a lot of the personalities of the directors themselves. Ridley
Mm.
Scott to me comes off a bit more combative. If you dismiss his stuff,
Yeah, that's true.
it's basically it's like an ornery old man, like, oh, this wasn't good. Well, fuck you, I'll do what I want. I'm Ridley Scott, and I don't care.
Hmm.
Whereas I think Martin was like, okay, cool. It's not to my standards that the fans expect. It's not to my standards. What can I do? And like you said, Kills of Fire movie, phenomenal movie. Like he heard all the criticisms from what the movie that was on Netflix during the pandemic that was like 3 hours
Oh, The
long, The
Irishman, yeah.
Irishman. He heard all the criticisms from The Irishman and was like, okay, I got this. Cool. He saw how everybody preferred Marriage Story over The Irishman. He's like, all right, I got you. I'm gonna come back with some heat for the next movie. And he did.
He did.
But Ridley Scott, Last Duel, everybody was like, this is horrible. Fucking House of Gucci was 50-50. Napoleon, you thought with Napoleon, it's like I think with this Napoleon, it's kind of on a slightly upward trend back again. It's not
Mm.
all the way there yet, but it's kind of like, all right, you halfway there, Ridley. Let's finish work. And if you don't want to be on set all day as the director, you have your AD, you have your second crew units. Those directors who want experience most likely to lead other projects and prove to these investors from Paramount, whereas Sony, all those people like, oh, I did X amount of scenes for this Ridley Scott movie, blah 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 blah. I know if you give them the work, they'll probably do an amazing job. If you don't, if like, and I get it. I used to do it too, shoot for coverage because I was lazy as hell, but I was in college. Like I'm not being paid, really Scott money to be on location. Like you're picking the amount of money that they're paying you to be there. So yeah.
So yeah, there's that. I would still advise people, I would still suggest people go see it,
Yes,
but
definitely
like
go see it. Yeah.
it's still a good movie. It's just I would temper your expectations in terms of like what you thought this was. Like I don't think this movie is like riding its way to the Academy Awards, like
No.
racking it up like it did, like Gladiator, the original one
Yeah.
did. But I think it's solid.
I mean, Denzel's probably gonna get a couple nominations for
I
best
hope
supporting
okay,
actor.
that I hope happens because
Yeah.
he absolutely deserves it. He killed it in this
Yeah.
movie.
So
So Denzel, please give Denzel the nominations. Like the Washington family, they're
killing
doing
it.
their thing this
They're
year.
doing,
Okay,
yeah.
let me tell you, they're doing their thing this year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So on to news. I know we briefly mentioned Wicked earlier. That its success in the box office. Cindy has some more information on that. So, what's the news? What's going on with Wicked, Cindy?
it's doing well,
Hmm.
which is good. Like actually it's doing really well. The weird thing is that like they tried to make the Wicked Gladiator thing called Glicked the Barbenheimer of 2024 and it's not giving those numbers for sure. I feel like because Barbenheimer was much more organic and
Yeah,
like people were very excited about this. I feel like people are very excited about Wicked. I don't know if they're like very excited about Gladiator, but
I don't know,
um
maybe 50-50.
yeah, it's kind of like I feel like we were very excited about Gladiator, you know what I'm saying? But I don't know if it has the fan base and like the potent kind of like I don't know what the Stardust. I'm not really sure in terms of
That
like
magic.
that magic where
Yeah.
and also product placement, marketing like Wicked did is going hard. They're going as hard as Barbie did last year.
Hmm.
Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande have been promoting this movie for an entire year now. Like
Yeah.
when I tell you that they were at the Oscars promoting this movie back in March, like they have been promoting this movie for a year straight. So like they put in the work and honestly, I feel like they deserve everything they're getting right now because they did the work. Um they opened this weekend with $114 million, which beat Les Miserables that opened with $103 million back in when did Les Miserables come out? The early 2010s, I think. So it beat that in terms of like the most successful Broadway opening
Yeah.
ever. And it did an additional $50.2 million internationally. And Gladiator II debuted with $55.5 million, which is the biggest ever opening for a November R-rated film. The previous title holder was 8 Mile back in 2002, which I did not know. So yeah, it's a very different. It's they're not doing Barbenheimer numbers
Mhm.
culturally. I don't think they're doing the same thing either. But I feel like the theater girls and boys, they will ride for their stuff. So
Oh
like,
yeah.
yes, I knew going into this weekend that like Wicked was going to do fantastic because
Mhm.
like everybody was talking about Wicked, like truly, and more than Gladiator in some places because I just feel like Wicked with the music and stuff. I feel like and the musical is so celebrated, like, and it's
Yeah.
been running forever. It's been running for so many years now
It's
that it's
like
just like
one of the longest in Broadway. It's like, yeah.
I think so, yeah. So like, yeah, I do think that Wicked and Gladiator did give the box office like a nice big boost because I feel like the last couple of weeks it definitely has been dragging.
Mhm.
So this weekend was easily like the biggest weekend that the box office has seen in a while.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head with the marketing aspect of this because comparably, I mean, of course, it calls back to like the Barbenheimer thing. Oppenheimer didn't do much promotion that much. Barbie full on media blitz.
Pull out.
Gladiator didn't hasn't done much promotion. Wicked full on media blitz. Like you know how AMC theaters has spiels before movies playing. The last thing I saw before Gladiator played was a promo for Wicked, telling people to enjoy like, oh,
Yes.
don't talk during films, don't XYZ, all that movie etiquette stuff. It was a Wicked promo. And then it
Hmm.
got into Gladiator. Like I do feel like um Hollywood has forgotten how important marketing is to a film. Um it's probably along with the actual picture itself, it's probably the most important thing in your budget for the movie. And I feel like the industry as a whole has forgotten that, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like post-pandemic, a lot more has to be done in order for your film to do numbers.
Mhm.
Because before, like you would go on press tours and stuff and whatever, like it was kind of okay. And I feel like how press has changed, where it's been mostly like YouTube videos, like BuzzFeed, and all of those like short little things that can be
Or
consumed very
complete set
easily.
pictures. Yeah.
Yeah, so and that kind of actually did a lot of work because people were like, "Oh, I see this person playing with puppies. Like, what is going on here?" And it's like, "Oh, they're promoting their new movie." And so like that was kind of enough. Post-pandemic, it's like you have a big budget movie, like you have to make that budget back plus more. You actually have to do a lot more stuff. Like you have to actually offer a Barbie Dreamhouse experience, like you have to offer clothes and makeup and all this other stuff to like associate with, which is exactly what they did with Wicked. Like they're selling cups, they're selling hotel room experiences where it's Wicked themed. Like the actors got to be on a press tour for an entire year. Like it really does take so much more just to get your movie to do big numbers now. Where before, I think like unless you were doing like a Marvel film or something, like it would sort of be a little bit easier. But
Yeah.
now it's like so much more goes into it just to get people to go to the theater and pay for a ticket. So it's like, yeah, it's I can't imagine as an actor like how it must be like having to do all this stuff. Like I'm sure everyone is exhausted. Like it's a lot.
Yeah. And then the opposite end of that, Red One, Chris Evans, The Rock, their latest Christmas action escapade. Um, it kind of dropped like, before the election and a week before these two movies. Um, and it was Amazon MGM picture. It was initially concepted as a streaming movie for Amazon Prime, kind of following, like we said, Napoleon, Killers of the Flower Moon, Fly Me to the Moon. A lot of these movies that were made for streaming platforms that have pivoted to theatrical releases in the last couple of years. But it's not doing as much as it should be in the box office. It's only grossed only like 50 million domestically and about
Mm.
64 million overseas, so about 117 million cumulative in box office. But the reported budget for the movie was 250 million. Um, and they're saying at this rate, it's gonna make under 200 million worldwide, which is kind of disappointing, especially this time of year when a Christmas movie. esque would do well.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's due to the overinflated budget because they're paying J.K. Simmons, they're paying Chris Evans, coming off of Marvel. He is now you have to pay to have Chris Evans in your movie. He might not have been that before, but post Marvel, he is on that top tier of actors, even though his resume doesn't exude that. Based on his market notoriety, he is a top billed actor. The Rock
Hmm.
is The Rock, he
Yeah.
and that's also a key point. The main people they're asking who can recover from this is The Rock. He had a similar experience with him and Emily Blunt with Jungle Cruise.
Yeah.
It was a good movie, but it was the budget was so much it didn't really make back the budget. And then of course, and that movie was also theaters and streaming simultaneously. And then of course he flopped with Black Adam. Then he took a break, went back to WWE, and then he's now. But I think he understood that this movie probably is not going to do as well based on those two experiences because now of course he's doing a Benny Safdie movie as well, which is a smaller budget.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's clear that The Rock has understood. Oh, I cannot do these over exuberant movies that cost a lot to make, and they're not going to make back the budget. I need to do some smaller scale pictures that showcase my ability as an actor to bounce back on my career. Chris Evans doesn't care as much because, like, hey, before he was doing like bit comedies, parody movies, post Marvel, he got to do Broadway. He got to do the movie with the train from Bungu. I forgot the name of the movie.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Snowpiercer.
Snowpiercer. He got to do experimental pictures like that. So if these movies bomb, I don't think Chris Evans cares because he can go back and do fun projects, that he always wanted to do. But yeah, so they're kind of concerned about The Rock's, his star and his presence in Hollywood. How will this affect? Because of course the Benny Safdie movie is done filming and he's now shooting the live action Moana, which I do think is also a gamble. Because the first Moana came out like a couple years ago, and Moana 2 is releasing soon, and you're doing a live action Moana, yeah. So we'll see how The Rock's career goes post this. He might return to wrestling again to try and bounce back his career, but who knows for now.
Yeah. 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 Points were made. Points were made. Okay, let's talk about what we've been watching.
First of all, I did mention I watched Tombstone, so old Western. Um, Beautiful movie, man. I can't. I don't know why I never watched it before, like, which is weird because my dad like loves westerns and shit. Which you would think as a movie I would have seen, but no, I know the movie tangentially where I can quote scenes from it because it's like super memeable. But yeah, I loved it. Like I said before, there's a feeling of watching a movie on film which it captured that for me. Even if I'm watching on my computer, even though the movie's from 1993, I still felt that. You got Val Kilmer, you got Kurt Russell, you got the eternally old Sam Elliott. I feel like Sam Elliott's always been old in every movie.
It's true.
It's got Bill Paxton. Like this movie was like perfect. It gets a little bit corny a bit with it. They try to put a romance in it, but it's still a wonderful movie. Like perfect. Like I'd recommend anybody who's a fan of westerns or loves that stuff to watch it. And like after the movie, I was like, oh, let me Google some of these people. I did not know that I knew Doc Holliday was a real person. I know he was from Georgia. So I was like, cool. The man is from Griffin. That's like an hour from me. And I was like, oh, cool. Like the man is basically from down the street from me. That's kind of awesome. But yeah, and then I also of course finished up Netflix's Arcane, a wonderful example of storytelling and how a lot of these game developers are able to extrapolate and expand their stories. Like I think when it comes to stories and writing, people kind of discredit video games, but the writing and storytelling in video games is so meticulous and detailed. I do think it's underappreciated. And I love the fact that these IPs are now themselves saying instead of optioning Hollywood to make these movies and comic books and stuff like that on our property, we're going to do it ourselves. And like we see that with, the course corrections that we're doing the Sonic movies, and you see it with this. When it's the people involved with the creation of said item and said project, um, there's a stronger understanding and a better connection to these characters, and it showcases and it's shown better on screen when you watch these kind of projects.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, I think last week I said I was gonna try and watch Get Back,
Hmm.
which I kind of did. Get Back is I've been on like a Beatles kick
Mm,
because life is hard and I just needed a distraction, and it's a good distraction. I've been listening to like a lot of music recently, more than I've been like watching movies.
mhm,
So I was watching the Get Back docu-series because I think Peter Jackson made a film from those recording sessions, but this is like I think the like the slightly edited, more like raw material of like the Beatles making their album. Was it Let It Be? Yeah.
mm,
Um, and this is like the album right before they make Abbey Road, which is like the last album they make together. So it was very interesting. It was long as hell. I couldn't get through all of it because there's like so much footage and it just takes a really long time. But like the first part where it's like everyone's pissed off and George Harrison leaves the band, like I saw that. That was interesting. Yeah, I the more I get into these guys, the more questions I have, and I'm just like they're like endlessly fascinating, and like their whole like the myth around them is interesting, them as individuals and how they were able to make like truly hits, like literally defining how we understand pop music. I think they made one of the first like real music videos in their movie. Like honestly pioneers, like truly. All credit goes to like their talent, whatever. But like it's really fascinating to watch people who are like just making music that is like iconic, but like at the time they're like
dysfunctional.
dysfunctional, like their pride is getting in the way of like who gets to sing what part, or like who like Paul's micromanaging, John's on heroin. Like there's just like so much going on. Yoko Ono is just there all the time. It's like an insane circumstance, and like it's just weird. I don't know. It's like I don't understand how people made music back in the day because it just doesn't seem like it makes any sense. But for some reason they were able to do it. So I watched that. And then I watched A Hard Day's Night, which is like the first movie they made. And it's like a part of the Criterion collection, which I didn't know. I did not know that. I did not know that it was like an important artifact of film, but it was really cute. And they're so fun, and like when they're and this is like their early days when they like all still liked each other. So I think they still liked each other towards the end. I just think they just could not work together anymore. But I think in those days when they were just like newly famous and just having a really good time, the charm of like their Britishness or whatever, like all of that comes through. The fact that they all seem like really good friends because they have been friends for years. So like at this point, like it's just cute to watch. Like it's just a cute little fun movie. It's like a mockumentary of them. And I think the basis of like the first kind of music videos of like how you cut between scenes and stuff, and how you like create a narrative with music, like all of that is happening with this film, which is really interesting because I didn't think that I thought it was just like a cute little thing that they did. I didn't think that it actually had like any real impact in terms of like how we consume things today. So that was fun, and their music is so like the early days music is just so fun and catchy and like adorable. So that lifted my spirits, and I was just like, oh, this is nice. So yeah, that's what I watched. And yeah, that is it from us this week. We hope that you guys are taking care of yourselves and doing well. Make sure to check out all of our social media sources if you can. We hope that you guys are gonna have a great Thanksgiving, and eat nice food and watch football or the parade or both.
Mm.
I don't know. Do they have basketball during Thanksgiving?
Don't remember. Probably do. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe.
Or watch the sport of your choice.
Yeah.
And if it gets too much, just go to your room and like not talk to anyone.
Yeah.
But yeah, we hope that you're all doing well, and we will see you guys in the next episode. Goodbye.
Goodbye. And in the words of Kendrick Lamar, if you got a family member that gives you drama during Thanksgiving, don't forget to squabble up.
There's a new album out. I know that.
Yeah.
I have to listen to it. What am I doing with my life? Okay. Bye.